similar means. Likewise, if the passage of the Federal Reserve Act in betrayal of the people was obligated to be subjected to public affirmation afterward, this would have never passed the people's vote, at least not an intelligent people. Likewise, if this act which was passed on the basis of many preposterous deceptions, was required to prove its means and to prove its objects served us, to prove that those objects were the best, the supreme way of serving the common objects of the people, we would have had no Federal Reserve Act. So I have, over 40 years, collected all of these observations into a prescription for a constitutional amendment for every country of the world, which is this present mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation, which not only establishes standards for writing laws which can only serve us, and invalidates many laws which do not serve us, but conforms or abides by these standards itself. So we know that Wilson also confessed the inevitable ruin of a once great industrial nation. Yet nothing was done by Wilson or ever afterward to eradicate the banking system as is necessary to implement a solution. Why? My only observation is there wasn't a solution. And that's what's so important about what we've been discussing the past few weeks. That there is a singular solution is the foundation for us to unite upon. Wilson said quite curiously, he confessed, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Now, how he could say this and never stand against the Federal Reserve Act, which he was referring to, is an incredible thing, I think. Of course, Wilson suffered a stroke and was greatly incapacitated over a great part of his second term in office. What, nonetheless, in turn, must we learn from this? Of course, as government is always the most plausible vehicle for vast exploitation, a once great industrial nation can only be controlled by its purported system of credit if, on the contrary, it has only abandoned the few elementary facts and principles of credit for an obfuscation which comprises the means of such vast and even terminal exploitation. Neither, of course, then, is the primary object of this exploitation to control us. On the contrary, it is inherently to preserve such unjustifiable and terminal means of exploitation, for which perpetrators must in turn deny us representative process. Nonetheless, this was Wilson's apology, long after violating campaign promises to make one of the most destructive mistakes in history, the unassented creation of a private monopoly of purported banking, which to obfuscate the few elementary principles of credit into a system of monumental, even terminal exploitation, was intentionally even given the deceptive title Federal Reserve. Wilson's own inescapable recognition of this fateful error probably contributed to his severe stroke late in his second term. He took that shame to his grave without even a meaningful attempt to reverse the crime he was indispensable to imposing upon us, until we reverse his errors forever. We know that the present offenders will never do what must be done if we are to eliminate this abominable crime forever. I myself have given them every opportunity to do so for 40 years. And so, as a matter of engineering, I've come upon this idea several years ago that this mandate was the only way, the only remaining way. Original drafts of it have been online for several years now. They received substantial public input, although very few people have suggested even the least furtherance of its extent or revision of its terms. It's a substantial document, one which indeed requires careful study in order to get your brain around it. It accomplishes some far-reaching things where the founders of the United States, for instance, did not give us a monetary system. They attempted to fix the value, the abstract value of a dollar to so many units of gold or silver, whereas the actual value of a dollar competes not only for the gold or silver reserves, which it's purportedly redeemable in, but all other property as well. And as the sum of all these things together vacillates, this is what itself makes it impossible for the dollar to actually, in practice, have a consistent value under the so-called gold standard. Likewise, where the currency is subject to interest, this has further ramifications in what I call maldisposition, in that as the sum of artificial indebtedness is multiplied forever in proportion to the circulation or remaining capacity to pay, ever more of every unit of the circulation is inherently dedicated to servicing debt versus sustaining the industry which is obligated to do so. So it isn't just inflation and deflation that we need to solve. It's maldisposition, which is a product likewise of interest. So what does our mandate do basically? It establishes, far beyond mathematically perfected economy, it establishes a format for all law, present and future. That is, there are observations of flaws of current law which can be readily rectified by a prescription to which all law must comply. Why do I say this? I say this because if laws are required to prove their objects, prove their means, and demonstrate their necessity, and if they're required to be written by the principles which, according to the few principles which accomplish these things, we have a completely different kind of a law than is presently prevailing in virtually every country of the world. That is, we have strange combinations of laws that are passed together, voted on and passed together. Completely unrelated things, sometimes even potentially conflicting things. So we require compliance with this format. We require public affirmation. We require periodic public reaffirmation. And all this for any existing law ensuing the Constitution to stand. That is, this format requires revision of law so that it's all in compliance. For some countries, this may differ depending on whether they have a constitution and whether that constitution serves them. In other words, if they have a constitution, they may want to reevaluate certain articles of their constitution. Furthermore, the mandate establishes mathematically perfected economy and prescribes the means for an immediate and virtually costless transformation to mathematically perfected economy. And finally, of equally indispensable importance, our mandate establishes means of securing absolute consensual representation. That is actually a prescription for the development of law and the potential revision of law by a public which may find fault with it, so that all laws are matters of constant perfection until they are refined to the simplest, most straightforward implementation of principles, the few principles, which truly do serve all of us equally. Thomas Jefferson said in a letter to Francis Gilmer in 1816, he said, "No man has a natural right to commit aggression on the equal rights of another, and this is all from which the laws ought to restrain him." Of necessity, this of course is exactly what our mandate sets out to accomplish. Not only necessarily to establish mathematically perfected economy, but to close all the avenues of betrayal which paved any way, not only for the present crimes against us, but for their possible likenesses at any time in the future. So, if I may, I would like to read this World Mandate for Mathematically Perfected Economy and Absolute Consensual Representation. This is a near final draft. There are other points that may or may not be incorporated in the final draft of it, but there are 10 sections. They range from declaration of necessity, authority, means, and fact of prevailing authority, to penalizations for breach of power. Rather than to try and preview it any further, I think probably the best thing to do would be to just read the mandate, and I may interject some points as I go on with the reading, and I'll attempt to either indicate that I'm injecting further, summarizations or whatever, by explicitly declaring so, or by voice inflection. So let's begin with Section 1. Declaration of necessity, authority, means, and fact of prevailing authority. That is, prevailing authority for the people to do this. Our Constitution makes the people the last bastion